Welcome to the Mobile Games Playbook in association with Liftoff. Join us as we uncover the latest trends in user acquisition, monetization, and mobile game design.
Hello and welcome to the Mobile Games Playbook. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. This is a podcast all about what makes a great mobile game, what is and isn't working for mobile game designers, and all of the latest trends. I'm your host, John Jordan, and joining me today, we have two experts. So we have Teemu Palomäki, who's Senior Games Analyst at GameRefinery by Liftoff. How's it going, Teemu?
Doing great. Great to be here.
Good. And also joining us, we have Sonja Skoglund, who is a Games Analyst at GameRefinery by Liftoff. How's it going, Sonja?
Very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good. And the reason we have you two in particular is you are experts on the Japanese games market, which is useful because that's exactly what we're talking about today. I guess Japanese mobile games often come up in the podcast. I don't think we've done a episode on it for a while. And I guess it's interesting because it is one of the larger sort of games markets in terms of sort of economics. And also a lot of innovation has clearly happened there. It was actually one of the first sort of big mobile games markets. And also culturally, it's quite interesting because there's some things which really appeal to the Japanese market, which obviously appeal globally, and some things which appeal to the Japanese market, which don't appeal anywhere else in the world. So quite interesting from various points of view, which we will discuss. Teemu, are you going to sort of kick us off with a sort of high level sort of approach of, what are the specific things that Japanese mobile gamers sort of really like? What characterizes that market?
Well, if we look at genres, for example, one thing that we've recently talked a lot about is how there is the location-based trend, which is on a totally different level than in Western markets, especially compared to US. So like in Japan, we have more variety in location-based gaming. There's obviously Pokemon Go, which is the sort of ultimate brand there. But they also have like Dragon Quest Walk for those who like turn-based RPG or older legacy RPG brand. Pikmin Bloom for casual audiences actually made its first appearance in top 50 this month. As we're recording it. So that's also going up there. They even have like 4X location-based game with Nobunaga's Ambition and, Monster Hunter Now that we have here, action RPG. And there's also like Ekimemo. So you can collect those girls who are also like based on train designs. So there's a lot of variety, and I think there's innovation coming up, with Kingdom Hearts Missing Link coming there. I think it's going to have some sort of location-based gaming, but they are hinting that you could also like move around the world from the comfort of your home. So interesting to see how that turns out. So that's one that is massively different from US, but also like RPGs, popularity of RPGs. It's like almost half of the top games in the market are RPGs, and you see sort of they have a lot of anime based or game based RPGs there, and if not the like brand actually being from an anime, they have a lot of collaborations with different brands to buff off the RPGs. But then we see also like sports, much more like those sports titles popping up in top 200 compared to West. Sports based on animes or like cartoony approach, sort of this arcade approach. They can go really crazy, like if you've ever seen Captain Tsubasa, the way they play soccer, it's like really over the top moves. Same with sort of Prince of Tennis or Haikyuu for volleyball. So, and we've probably mentioned a couple of times Uma Musume, where girls are racing horses and they're competing, running around the track. So it's really those genres, for example, are really popular. And I think Sonja can maybe elaborate more about like idols and rhythm games as well, something that we don't see.
Yeah, those are, you mentioned rhythm games and idle games, so-called. Those are two other genres that really do a lot better or exist in a much larger space in the Japanese market than the Western markets. And well, rhythm games, I think it's quite common knowledge that they're very on a very different level. The popularity in East Asia in general, but especially in Japan, there's a long history of rhythm games in the game arcades, and there's also they've come a long way from just those Dance Dance Revolution small arrows. There's a lot of innovation in the core gameplay there also. And then there's these so-called idle games. There's actually sort of two types, and one is this idle management sort of game where you collect a group of, well, idols, which are like celebrities who are very purposefully produced for business purposes, and people create these huge fan bases for these idol groups. So there are idol management games where you collect these idols and then train them in these training programs inside the game. And then there are usually some interactive story elements embedded also. So that's one type. And then the other one is actually rhythm games and idle games combined, where you get to enjoy being a fan of these idol groups, but also actually playing a rhythm game that's where the music is taken from the idols' real life produced music. And then there are some games that have the whole group of idols is completely fictional and it's not based on any real life celebrities. So just for the game series, they have created these completely fictional idols and produced music just for the game, and then you can play it inside the game. And this actually interestingly ties back to the sports category a little bit with Uma Musume. And I know we've talked about Uma Musume, but it's a very interesting, very Japanese combination of a lot of things, because it is an idol game in a sense where you manage these girls that are horses but are basically idols. And then there's the sports aspect. And they also have these concerts. So it also like ties back to music games. So that's a really interesting game to highlight.
One thing I will say is it sometimes gets a bit confusing when you're saying idle games. It's that's IDOL, as in an idle game, something of
Yes.
a character you worship. Rather than often we talk about idle games, IDLE, which are games where you just let the game happen, which are quite popular in the West. But I guess you could have an idle game about idle characters. That would maybe be much too much. But yeah, good. So it's a good introduction, and I guess what you've said there, I guess, shows on multiple levels just how different, even in terms of genres, the Japanese sort of market is, and so many things to unpick. It's really interesting that location-based games. So many location-based games have been tried with the biggest brands, in the West. So Harry Potter, I guess, being a good example. They just haven't worked. Whereas in Japan, for various reasons that we can sort of discuss, you mentioned like half a dozen there of, they're not Pokemon Go success stories, but they are successful sort of games. Yeah, do you think that the fact that Japanese society is so based on sort of manga and anime, so the majority of the games will sort of be viewed through that lens? I mean, are there any successful games that sort of come to mind that aren't sort of an anime type game? I mean, do they have the Call of Duties or those sort of things, or is that just really just doesn't appeal to the Japanese audience?
I think there's room for those games as well. We see games that are popular in the West to also be popular in Japan, but I think it's quite safe to say that if people are making a game with Japanese market in mind, it's going to be manga, anime, at least sort of influenced by it heavily. So sort of having that cartoony approach, and even like, you know, when you watch an anime, you can tell those character archetypes that are there. There are massive fans for specific type of archetypes of characters, so you want to have those archetypes, even though it seems like a cliche or stuff. People are really looking forward to specific types of characters. Some people are really into these, you know, tsundere characters who are sort of look like they don't like you at all. They hate you, but then kind of like when you get to know them, they might be a little bit shy about it and kind of liking you, and so you have these different types of characters, that the archetypes that people really love, and it shows.
I mean, I'm not an expert at all on Japanese culture, but obviously having been in games for a while, sort of looked at it. But I think it's probably hard to overemphasize just how the whole of Japanese culture is driven by sort of manga and anime as sort of fundamental to the whole society, no matter, you know, whether you're a kid or a adult in Japan. That's, even if you probably, I'm sure there's lots of people in Japan who don't read anime books, but it's just part of the culture in a way that we just don't have sort of in the West, whereas it's much more, you know, you watch cartoons when you're a kid and then you grow up to watch, you know, Marvel films or something. It's just really not like that in Japan, is it? Where it's almost like, yeah, there's a whole. It's not a subculture. It's sort of pretty much culture is viewed in that respect.
That's a good point. That it's like you said, it's not only kids' cartoons, but there's a lot of anime and manga specifically written and filmed for adults, and it's like penetrates through the whole culture. And obviously we also see that in the gaming market, how the even if it's not based on an existing anime series or manga series, the art style of anime manga is very prevalent.
As you say, even some games that aren't based around that, if they are successful, they do end up then having anime made about them, because that's how people, you know, consume that. You know, any successful culture will be consumed through that way. So it sort of becomes sort of self-fulfilling.
They've even had like I remember there was also like a movie about mobile game. So there was this I think in West it was called The Alchemist Code. I remember that mobile game. They advertised that they had like a movie theater run of like a film made of the world of that game. So even mobile games can turn into like these big screen anime movies.
It's interesting. I hadn't really thought about the sports stuff you were talking about before. So was it right that you said there was haiku for volleyball?
Yeah, the haiku is the name of the anime series. So it's a volleyball anime brand, and they've released a really I think successful mobile game of that brand.
And even in that sports stuff, would you see? I guess that there would be, say, realistic soccer games and baseball games as well, but there would still be quite a big proportion that would be cartoon anime.
When it's realistic, it's sort of, well, aimed for a more mature audience maybe, and you know, I think the realistic sports, the ones that we see would be mainly soccer and baseball being sort of the big ones in Japan. Of course, those are also popular in the cartoony side as well. But
it's also interesting in this one cartoony like arcade sports game about baseball that I played. They have had collaborations with real life baseball players. So also this overlap or mixing of these anime and imaginary worlds with the real world is also something in what we see more in collaborations, I think, in Japan than West, maybe.
Because again, sort of collaborations is something that we when we've spoken in previous podcasts about sort of live ops and that sort of stuff, collaborations is a massive thing generally for any mobile game. But again, correct my limited knowledge, I suppose. But the anime scene often has lots of, you have collaborative, the worlds between these anime things are sort of mashed up together in lots of, in every sort of situation. And none of these things are sort of, walled gardens that sort of, here's my anime and characters and they never interact. I mean, it seems like there's loads of, the whole thing is like a mashup, basically.
You can go crazy with the collaborations. It's like the games can have so many different characters just interacting there, but I think it's always like one collaboration at time. So not necessarily like multiple brands clashing at once or anything, but of course the collaboration stuff stays in the game and is available. So I've had I've built a lot of my RPG teams around collaboration characters. So no original mobile game characters, but all collaboration stuff, because those can be really strong for a while. Of course, when they sort of fall out, they fall out fast, and like, because you don't release like new upgrades for those characters necessarily. But they're really powerful for a while.
So we've had sort of some idea of sort of the culture and the sort of genres. And I guess the other important thing that underpins this is that the Japanese market is one of the sort of most highly monetized from an ARPU basis. So for individual players, the average that they're going to spend is going to be, if not the highest, can be one of the highest sort of territories in the world. And I guess the combination of those things, having its own culture and having people are going to spend hundreds, thousands of dollars a year playing these games, sort of combines the fact that you can have these sort of, to us might seem weird niches, because you don't need so many players to make them profitable, because you have this sort of quite high monetization. So do you want to talk a bit about monetization and how the Japanese market ends up with these very high sort of levels?
I think it comes with like the gacha mechanics. They are more varied in there. And I think it's also not just the monetization mechanics, but overall game design. So to make the gachas appealing, you need to have something interesting to pull. So I think the way that the Japanese market is so character centric also plays to that. So and the characters themselves. One thing that is interesting to note, in the West, the characters they might they talk these generic, or they talk about the world of the game, whereas in Japanese mobile games, the characters often speak to you, the player. They're sort of interacting with you, so you are forming this relationship with the character. They also have the systems to support that. But when you have that kind of relationship with the characters, characters are everywhere. They're sort of relatable content. Then when you go to the gacha and pull for them, you are more eager to get them, and you build that relationship. And gacha animations, if I finish my thought with this, gacha animations, that is a form of art in Japan. So my favorite one maybe is from Full Metal Alchemist Mobile, where you have this sort of rotary phone that is ringing, or rotary phone that you spin 3-digit number in there, and that's the way you pull the gacha. So you put the digits in, it calls, and then a train arrives, and from the train come the characters that you obtained through that gacha. So it's more interactive, it's creative, it's memorable, and it feels a little bit like you can affect the rates. I think to this day, I think it doesn't affect the rates at all, but it sort of adds that element. Like if you're going to a slot machine, you might put that coin to your hands and blow a kiss or something, like, I'm gonna do this now, and you place it, you put that, you have the sort of belief that this is improving your odds. So if you put your lucky number in that rotary phone, it feels like you can get better props or something. So it's a form of art. Whereas in the West, it can be just press the 10 pull button, and then you pop, 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 pop. You get the couple of shards that you obtain from the gacha. So the excitement levels are totally different.
And also, going back to monetization and this like character-centric game worldview, one thing that came to mind is these, especially in games where you collect these like beautiful, sexy ladies as your characters, like Teemu mentioned, from all of these different character archetypes, like tsundere or a cute or innocent or whatever. Especially in those games, we see these player polls where the game organizes a poll for the players where they can vote for their favorite character, and then they promise that in the next big event they're going to bring content related to the character that's most popular. So obviously that's a great way of securing your gains in advance and really like catering to the audience.
Just to explain, I guess most people know what a sort of gacha system is, but it's basically a sort of random drop system, which is actually, as far as I know, actually the Japanese games companies invented it. Would have been like sort of 20 years ago when the first mobile games came out. It was a sort of a random, and it was sort of I guess inspired by pachinko machines. I think that was the sort of original idea, at least. When you're saying there that it's very character based, would it be then that most gachas would be then creating, you'd be getting a character out of that, rather than like in the West you might get sort of gear or sort of costumes or say shards or something like that. But would it be the case in general that most Japanese games would actually be about characters rather than sort of accessories around characters?
That's the safest way to go, because people form the best bond with characters. The people I think next was some like animal mascots, those kinds, and like the more inanimate the thing becomes, the less kind of attracted you are to it, less interested you generally are with it. So characters are sort of the safest way to go.
I guess we go on to sort of localization or culturalization. That's sort of quite fundamental to how those Japanese games are. Whereas in the West, just a game designer, you would have characters as part of your gacha maybe, but you'd have a whole bunch of other stuff. You could think, I think all these other cool things I can put in my gacha system, which you think would be much more appealing. But it's at a very deep level. It's just the what people are attracted to is just very different.
Also, the way you advertise the gacha. I think Sonja had a good example on this, like how the gachas can be different in the West and Japan, with Legend of Mushroom, I think.
Yeah, that's an interesting case. So actually, yeah, Legend of Mushroom was first released in Japan and then a little bit later in the US, and I've been playing both of those versions, and it's interesting to see differences and like clear localizations between them. And one is that the whole game, like a big part of the whole game, is constantly pulling this gacha, which is a magic lamp that appears in the main UI, and you keep constantly pulling it. In this case, it's an equipment gacha, but and the focus is more like on the constant small dopamine hit that you get from the gacha pulling, and then the gear is also kind of quirky, a little bit funny, and mixes like fantasy and modern elements. So maybe that's like an Asian take on it. Not sure, but the interesting part was that when it comes to differences between the two versions, in the Japanese version, again, characters, it's not just the lamp, but there's this goddess of the lamp that's always standing beside the lamp, and she's very sexy and beautiful, and she talks to the player. And then in the Western version, there's only a very minor tutorial character who only appears when they introduce new features to the player. But in the Japanese version, the lady is always there, and it was just such a clear way to implement characters yet again. And when they were advertising for the game, they actually had hired this actress to cosplay as the lady of the lamp. And I think she was maybe singing and dancing, or at least playing the game, and she was a very attractive lady. And so that's also like one thing, like cosplaying as the characters is of course originally a Japanese thing from the conventions, and although we have a lot of it in the West now.
It seems interesting that you're having this sort of breaking the fourth wall, so the characters talking to the player, which again would be, I mean, I can't even think, I'm sure it has happened, but I can't really think of that being something that I see a lot in mobile games, whereas, as you say, that could be something that is sort of how players, it's a very subtle but very significant change in how a player would interact with the game world, where I'm in charge of the game and I'm getting, I'm just telling people what to do in the game or getting my characters to do these things, whereas the characters talking back to you, I mean, it seems subtle, but equally, if you expect that, then games that didn't have that, you'd feel sort of like you weren't very engaged with them because the characters weren't doing what you were expecting them to do, which is sort of in any COD way talk back to you. So I guess it's sort of just underlying how different at a low level some of these sort of different sort of cultural games can be. So there have been clearly some Japanese games have been obviously massively successful in the West. Some Western games have been successful in Japan. Are there any trends we're seeing there? Is there sort of more or less of that sort of stuff happening? I guess there are now lots of good localization, culturalization, outsourcing companies who sort of handle these sort of things. So we're much more technically aware of what we need to do. But are there anything you can sort of talk about there in terms of stuff you've seen sort of recently of games doing either well or badly?
I'd say localization is always important. No matter what kind of game you're making, if you want it to succeed in Japan, you need to localize it well. The way that you translate this stuff. I know these days it's popular to just throw stuff through Google Translate or ChatGPT or whatever. But like having actual people translate it, check it, that it works. We've seen some localization examples where like words are broken in the middle to kind of two spaces, and like it can look very cheap. So like doing the localization properly. Of course, we mentioned the way you can help the appeal is through the characters, bringing characters to the front. Also, like recognizing Japanese cultural events, seasonal events. I think we have Golden Week starting very very soon. So that is something that is often recognized in Japanese. So it's like a week of like series of vacations in Japan where everyone is sort of off, and it's at the change of April May. So not much is happening during that time. I notice it mostly in like the mangas that I follow weekly. Those are on breaks during that time and so forth. So recognizing these events that are significant in there.
And also actually Golden Week is sort of the opposite. Like Teemu mentioned that the mangas go on break, but looking at games, that's when people are on holiday, so they have a lot of time to play. So that's a really good opportunity to engage players. And actually, there's another example of Legend of Mushroom and differences between the localizations, because right now there is exactly a Golden Week event in the Japanese version, but obviously not in the Western version.
Yeah, but you don't need to limit it. I think Supercell with Brawl Stars, they had Golden Week event going on in the global version as well. It doesn't really matter. Like it's cool skins, and there are Japan fans outside Japan who enjoy anything Japanese. So seeing these Golden Week skins with like these Japanese cats there, I think it appeals to certain audience, and cool skin is a cool skin, doesn't matter what it's inspired from.
Have there been any Japanese games that you think have done a good job of being, very Japanese and appealing to that local market, but also sort of doing well globally? Because I guess it's a bit dated now, but sort of historically stuff like sort of Puzzles and Dragons, massively successful game, one of the most successful games ever, just in Japan. Monster Strike, again, another enormously successful game that didn't really work outside of Japan, even though it's $1 billion it's raised. Do you think the Japanese developers are getting better now, sort of appealing to both sort of audiences?
I'd say, well, first one that comes to mind, Pokemon, but that's in Pokemon Go. It's developed by Niantic, so it's sort of Western in that sense, but it's a Japanese brand. And thinking of more Pokemon games, I think the Pokemon Masters X, that is a game that is having decent spikes, and if the IPs are popular enough, I think Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis did okay for a while out there, but I think mostly if it's these anime style games that are doing well in the West, it often comes from China, Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail. So those are sort of devouring the space from like the games of anime fans. But
Well, there are also the Dragon Ball games, which are, well, Dragon Ball obviously is a huge IP also in the West, like one of the few animes that everybody knows, and they are very old games, so that probably has an effect in the equation.
And just to go back to Pokemon Go, was obviously it's a Japanese originated IP developed by a American company. In Japan, there been any obvious sort of a Japanese person playing that realised it wasn't developed by a Japanese company, that particular game, or does that actually sort of show that the best sort of games, doesn't really matter where you are in the world, there's enough knowledge now that these things can be sort of global, even though Japan is a somewhat separate market to some degree?
They probably noticed that it's not like Japanese game, because they have certain habits when making UI, and like I could see there being maybe a little bit more gotcha elements or stuff there. Mobile games, they have these Western games as well, so like I think it's also very very good for them. Obviously they have enjoyed it very much.
Lovely. Let's give everyone listening a bit of homework. So I guess Legend of Mushroom is one, but if you were going to encourage someone to download one characteristic Japanese mobile game to take a taste of what we've sort of been talking about, Sonja, what game would you suggest people download?
This is my personal favorite, but it's Heaven Burns Red.
Okay.
And it's something that I would not expect to see in the West. It's anime style, and it's from Bright Flyer Studios, and they are known for very very elegant and sleek design, and very deep focus in the story element. So I really enjoy the story, and there's a lot of dialogue and a lot of choices, and you get to play as a female character, interacting with other females and creating these meaningful relationships, and of course enjoy turn-based RPG.
Teemu, what would you recommend?
One that comes to mind is Memento Mori. I think that was really beautiful experience. It's more successful in Japan and not doing so well in the West, even though there's like localized version. But it has this really beautiful, watercolor art style. Like really, it shows that you can make really these beautiful experiences, and this is an idle RPG, this time IDLE. So that kind of idle RPG, but really beautiful music, really like sort of, it's a great experience, and it's showing that these different types of games can be really popular. It has beautiful soundtrack. Each character has their own song, and so that's something to check out if you want to see something more interesting from Japan.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for your recommendations, and thank you very much for your expertise in the podcast. Thank you, Sonja and Teemu.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for watching or listening to the podcast, whoever you are consuming it. Every episode, we are talking about what's going on in mobile games, which is now an enormously variation of gaming around the world, and lots of different cultures, lots of different trends going on there. So I hope you are enjoying our episodes. Please do subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.